so far, our goal has really just been to get our thoughts down on the spreadsheet, right? Get our basic ideas down. So now the goal is to go back and look at all the different data sources we have available to us to actually find some of these metrics and really fine tune them. Another thing we want to make sure is make sure our units are correct. Make sure that we're citing our numbers in terms of months or years or weeks to make sure we're consistent and clear. Part of this process is simplifying all the numbers and stuff out there so that the numbers that we care about is far less than we had coming in. We have a number of data sources to use. If you have an e-commerce company, your Google Analytics data is probably a valuable thing to look at. I'm just going to forecast how the website's actually performing in terms of traffic and orders and sales. You also may have an e-commerce platform or payment transaction platform like Stripe or PayPal or Shopify or other ones. We're going to have some data around the value of orders. If you have a physical product, you may have inventory reports of how many things are being sold. So you're going to have all these different data points out there you're going to be trying to use. What we're looking to do is say, hey, I know there's conversion rate, but conversion rate can mean many different things. Or we say, hey, we know that web traffic is important, but how exactly are we going to define that? So we may go back and look in to see this 3% conversion rate. We'll find a little bit more detail about that. So for example, we may say 3% was what our conversion rate was last month. We may see it actually average 2.5% over the last 12 months. We'll go back into our advertising metrics, and we might see where our traffic came from. Perhaps we'll say a percentage of traffic from different channels. And last month, we know that organic traffic was 50% of our overall traffic. Google AdWords may have driven 25% of our overall traffic. And we know that perhaps Facebook drew another 25% of our traffic. But perhaps over the last 12 months, the number might be a little bit different, right? So over the last 12 months, we may have gotten 45% from organic traffic and perhaps a little bit higher amount from Google. It's really just going to depend. And the goal really here is just to understand whether our numbers are making sense. Our cash burn last month was $1,000. We may know that our average spending over time, we may get this from our accountant, maybe that was only $900 per month. We know that there's 25,000 cash on hand. Our current customers, 100 last month. We may have only averaged 85 over the past 12 months. We're not looking for all of the detail that's possible. We're just looking for the most relevant or metrics that we can use to make important business decisions. Maybe we're looking at data points that may be skewed from recent things that happened that aren't representative of the future. For example, we just launched a product, or we just got featured in the App Store, or we just landed a huge client that we worked so hard on landing this past month, or we honestly didn't spend any money in advertising and we only got really close friends to purchase. All of these things could skew, meaning that they won't be the most representative or meaningful number to use for the rest of our forecast going forward. This number of customers last month may have been 100. Well, that may have been a big launch month. We may have had a big sale. It may have been a holidays. Maybe that's not the best number to use over the next 12 months. Maybe therefore our 85 average, perhaps we adjusted to exclude big things. Maybe that's our best average to use going forward. But maybe perhaps for something like monthly cash burn, perhaps $1,000 last month is the best number to use forward. Perhaps we made hires or increase in costs, so that is the best number for us to use for the rest of our forecast. Common example of this is, when businesses look to scale, they may assume a certain conversion rate. If you early days, when it's heavily organic traffic, you're not spending tons of money on trying to advertise, your conversion rates may be high. It's probably not fair to expect the same sort of conversion rate when you're driving tons of new people to your site. Often easy early on to find the new customers you're acquiring, and your acquisition costs may be pretty low because you're marketing people who already know you or know the product or understand it or know they want this. But later as you grow, it can be far more expensive to acquire people because you're reaching new sets of people. You're trying to convince people who have never been approach with this idea, it's maybe really difficult to get them to convert. So we're going to continue to, for each one of these metrics that we find, research and find the best data from our business to use for forecasting. You can use many different date ranges. Part of the reason why months is a great starting point is because if you're at the very early stages of the project, you actually are going to care about how much you spend on a month-to-month basis. Because tracking cash or sales is going to be really important. Part of it is just standardization. All companies report numbers on a monthly basis. Part of it is weekly numbers, maybe too variable on a week-to-week basis. So it may have too much variability or change in the metrics, but quarterly or annual numbers may simply be too long to be able to parse out what's happening. So you're trying to find a unit of time that has enough data that averages out some things that are happening, but not too much that it doesn't provide you some insights into what's actually happening. We're going to create a model which is going to be a monthly forecast, month over month. It's going to add up to 12 months. So to do that, we have to have an idea of, okay, well, what's our web traffic in a month, right? So we may be looking at, we track that as a weekly basis. We have a weekly metric. Maybe we have a daily metric we think about. But for this forecast, we're going to be looking at a monthly forecast. And a simple mistake is just to mix up units to say, this is my conversion rate of sessions to orders or traffic to orders. The numbers can mean slightly different things. When you cite a metric, you're probably going to want to use a metric which is reflective of the business and reflective of other businesses like it. So you want to note that what you're citing is probably representative of what your data says, but also what other people report, so you can use it appropriately. You're going to want to get the timing metrics appropriate to note that you're keeping things, whether it's weeks or months or years, that it's appropriate. Mixing up units or mixing up metrics, mixing up timing, those are very easy and possible things to do. It screws up all the math. So this looks like a mess right now, but that's perfectly fine, right? So this goal is, we haven't tried to create a forecast or try to create a structure behind this yet. Really, the goal here is we're going to use this as a resource to dig into for numbers kind of throughout. And we're going to continue to add and change notes over time. You really just want to get your thoughts down on paper. Some of the stuff you may use, some stuff you may not. That's okay. Spreadsheets can often look really structured, but oftentimes it's an interesting thing. Really structured spreadsheets doesn't necessarily mean that it's accurate. Doesn't actually mean that it's correct. Early on, I'm not worried about structuring everything. I'm not worried about formatting. I'm really just worried about getting the notes down there. The same way you would write a paper or an article or a business plan, you're not going to necessarily show some of your first draft, but those are important things to go through that process to get to the finished copy. This is the same thing.